Welcome to Executive Insights for Life Sciences Innovators, and thanks for joining us. On this podcast, we'll explore leadership, innovation, and growth in the life sciences sector. I'm Don Alexander, founder of GeneCoda, a boutique executive search firm dedicated to connecting visionary leaders with life sciences companies shaping the future of therapeutics and scientific tools. On each episode, we'll dive into candid conversations with industry pioneers, uncovering strategies, insights, and real world experiences that drive success in our industry. If you're interested in presenting as a guest of a future episode, please scan the barcode image at the top of my video frame and follow the instructions. Now I'm pleased to be joined by Larry Tiffany, the CEO of GenrAb. Larry, welcome.
Great to see you, Don.
Absolutely. Larry's a seasoned biosciences executive, serial entrepreneur, and currently the CEO of GenrAb, a biotechnology company developing fully human neuroprotective antibodies to treat neurodegenerative diseases. Larry has a proven track record of founding, financing, and scaling biotech ventures. He most recently led MedCura from early prototypes through FDA approval and commercialization, where he now serves as executive chair. Prior to that, he founded Diogenics, a neuromolecular diagnostics company spun out of GeneLogic, raising both venture capital and greater than $2 million in philanthropic funding to develop the first new diagnostic for multiple sclerosis in over 70 years. Diogenics was acquired by Amarantus Biosciences. Larry's held senior roles at Ore Pharmaceuticals, GeneLogic, and GeneTrax, where he helped to raise over $300 million and structured $700 plus million in corporate partnerships with major global pharmaceutical companies. He holds a JD from Franklin Pierce Law Center, an MS in biotechnology from Johns Hopkins, and a bachelor's in biochemistry from Nazareth College. So, Larry, we're going to dive right in here. Tell us, first and foremost, a little bit about your career journey and leadership philosophy. So, what inspired your journey into the life sciences industry?
Yeah, Don, I even from before when I went to undergrad, I really loved biology and biochemistry. And then I over time I fell in love with the kind of the high-paced, high risk, high reward lifestyle that comes with life sciences. And I guess, I've been around enough now that, for guys like us, when you and I first met, the genome, the whole human genome was a concept. It wasn't quite real. You now think about that like you would imagine life without the internet. It's almost impossible to believe. But watching that evolution and then watching the incredible interest that generated in how that would be used in medicine. And now we fast forward, oh geez, almost 25 years later, and we're really starting to now, and GenrAb's a good example of engaging that science to be much more actively involved in the creation of and being, integral to new medicines.
That's fantastic. You've been with a lot of different organizational types over the years. I'm curious, are there pivotal moments in your career that kind of led you up to your current role?
Yeah, so I was first recruited into an executive function in at one of the first generation genomics companies at GeneLogic. And I was the 24th employee in what became a company with, well over a hundred employees, you being helpful in recruiting a lot of that team. And then I watched that company go from incredible success. At one point, we had raised the largest public financing for a life sciences company. And then 2 weeks later, Solera almost doubled our number. And so watching that and then watching the company's arc and eventually helping them repackage and sell off some of the business and then helping me transition into moving from running worldwide business development at a large publicly traded company into doing really my first private fundraising as the CEO of Diogenics. And then selling Diogenics, as you mentioned, really lit a fire under me that there is incredible value creation that can occur with the right technology and the right team.
That's great. And how has your leadership philosophy evolved over the years?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think as I've gotten older, I've come to really treasure people over technology. And I'm not saying that just because I'm on the phone with you, and that's one of the great things you do, but it really is true. You have to have both, right? You can't just have a great team without something that's innovative and disruptive. But you can have something that's innovative and disruptive, and without the right team, it's not going to come to fruition. Um, and I've also learned that, failure is kind of the norm. Almost if you go through a day and something hasn't gone wrong in life sciences, you almost question, what is like today a federal holiday I didn't know about, or and so, winning in many respects for me now comes from kind of wearing and growing from that failure and navigating. So, I think the other thing that has been, as I've done this now for a while, taking technologies that are simple and robust are usually more likely to be successful and financeable. Not that really, cutting edge, innovative technologies aren't interesting, but as you get out on that bleeding edge, you realize that there's not a lot of other support around you in terms of what others know. And so, so I've tried to find a way to, kind of navigate those principles.
Oh, that's a great overview and a great philosophy, Larry. Thank you for that. Let's dive in a bit to GenrAb and the antibody gene signature technology. I was wondering if you, for our audience, could explain a little bit about how that works and, basically why it's effective at identifying neuroprotective antibodies.
Yeah, and I certainly won't do justice to the true vision behind the technology, but functionally, human beings are routinely create and can create therapeutic antibodies. Lecanemab for Alzheimer's that Biogen brought to the market was an example of that, and there are others. The hardest part is not that we know it happens, it's how do we identify those? Because your body can create up to literally computationally a quadrillion different antibodies. So how do you find the CMO at GenrAb says the needle in a stack of needles? How do you figure out which is the right one? And so we use very sophisticated analysis and combinatorial math, and we determined that there are patterns of hypermutation in antibodies that we believed are both disease associated and antineuronal, meaning that these antibodies would have an active engagement with neurons in the brains of human beings. And we started off with a small cohort of 32 antibodies. We did some pretty in-depth analysis of what they bind to, human tissue, mouse tissue, different neuronal cell lines, and we identified a short list of those, and then started doing some analysis on those to understand if they would indeed create a meaningful clinical impact. And from that, we identified our lead candidate, which is we call TGM10.
Gotcha. And I guess what makes TGM10 stand out amongst the other candidates that you may have looked at?
Yeah, a couple of things. One, its binding and staining pattern in human mouse tissues was pretty unique. It was highly antineuronal, and what we've seen is in the brain, it only and specifically internalizes into neurons, so not other brain tissue. And then we also saw that, or we thought that TGM10 could be neuroprotective, and in some early preclinical and in vitro assays, we showed that to be true. But what was really exciting for us is when we started to then dig into how that works, we saw that TGM10 actually internalizes into neurons and starts engaging with key stress management machinery in the neuron. And that, as we now then take the lens kind of back out to the bigger focus around neurodegenerative disease, we know that being able to keep neurons from being damaged or dying in a stress event is really important because neurons are post-mitotic, which means you don't get more of them and they don't regrow. So how do you still manage those stress events and yet, live to fight another day? And that's what we're starting to see with TGM10.
That's great. And does it, just a quick follow-on question, does it cross the blood-brain barrier?
Great question. Yeah, look, when we spend time with our friends in the capital markets, it's one of their first questions. And so initially we only knew that by proxy. But very recently, we've done a series of studies in independent preclinical animal models, different models done at different CROs, where we've shown that TGM10 not only crosses the blood-brain barrier, but it becomes internalized into neurons. And indeed, what it looks like is the neurons create kind of a sink for the antibody, which is a good thing, which means the antibody can stay in that neuron and be available to that neuron should a stress event occur.
Interesting. Okay, great. Are there other trends, I guess, in neurotherapeutics, aside from what you've seen there at GenRAB that are particularly exciting at this point?
Yeah, look, as speaking to you because we knew each other when we were both younger guys. As we all age, and now more than ever, you look at our extended lifetimes. That's an expectation. I just last week we had one of the older members of our family passed away, and I was talking to. So now that generation is down to only one or two people, but they're all in their kind of late 80s to early 90s, where at that same event, they were talking about how normally they would go to these events and there wouldn't be anybody much over about 70 or 75 years old. So I think what becomes really important to all of us as we age is our brain health becomes paramount, right? Cognition, mobility, dexterity, memory, all of those things come from having, a robust and functional brain. And so the strategy of protecting neurons provides an opportunity to be, first in class and bring something to the market that really to heretofore hasn't been available. In the end, we all value the ability to live life on our own terms. And so what has gotten me excited about GenRab, there are certainly others doing great work in neurology and neurodegeneration, is I believe neurological disease will eventually become one, if not the predominant risks of aging that we all want to manage more effectively.
Absolutely. And I can relate, my stepfather being turning 97 in September. I'm sorry to hear about your loss as well, but that's certainly an area that impacts us all, as you say. Um, Let me ask you a little bit about scaling, funding, and business strategy. I believe, if I understand correctly, GenRAB closed a recent seed round, or fairly recent seed round, led by the Actium Group. And what key milestones did the seed round, I guess, unlock for GenRAB? What are you hoping to do next?
Yeah, look, we're incredibly fortunate that we're part of a growing life sciences ecosystem in Dallas. And again, you and I knowing each other for many years, a lot like what you saw in the state of Maryland, 25 years ago, where there was this beginning of the metammunes and the GeneLogics and the Celeras and the human genome sciences. You're starting to see that now in Dallas. So our lead investor, Actium Capital, they share our vision for changing the way neurodegenerative diseases are going to be treated. So the seed round gives us a really big leg up. We'd run the company mostly on non-dilutive financing, a little bit of friends and family money, but this really allows us to complete all of the preclinical work we need to declare a lead therapeutic product candidate. So for those who don't do as much work in the antibody world, we have the native antibody that we identified, fully human antibody from a patient that was undergoing active neurological disease. We've now tried to take that antibody and manipulate it a little bit to become more bioavailable in serum, potentially be more capable of being a drug. And so we now have the capital to do that while we start to investigate the next 80 antibodies that are in our pipeline. So we'll do less work on those than the lead, certainly. But just in the work we've done, what we've seen is that other group of 80 antibodies, they aren't binding the same targets. They don't act the same way TGM10 does. And so we see a robust opportunity here to play a role, not just in a lead asset, but as a platform company.
Absolutely, subsequent assets. We'll touch on that. I appreciate that. I was curious about how the biolabs ecosystem, I guess you mentioned this as well, but you all were a Golden Ticket Award winner, I believe, recently. I was curious about how that has all gone and how that, award recognition is backed up, I suppose, the
Yeah.
company's plans.
Yeah, there's three great parts about the Golden Ticket Award. One is they are sponsored by pharmaceutical companies, and so the judges at these competitions are made up of people from R&D in large pharma, which makes them very disease expert, very drug development expert, and so they're really great competitions. The advantage you get from a monetary standpoint is we've now won two Golden Ticket Awards, one supported by and sponsored by Boehringer Ingelheim, and other sponsored by Otsuka. You receive some lab space. We're in the biolabs at Pegasus Park in Dallas for a year, and so that's allowed us to have a space to now grow a team into. All of that being non-dilutive, and then the part that I didn't really realize when we started the Golden Ticket is we then start to engage with and interact with that pharma company. And so we now, a couple times a year, we'll get on the phone with both Boehringer Ingelheim and now we're setting this up with Otsuka, where we kind of give an update on what we're doing. And they are great sources of information about, in fact, we had a discussion with Boehringer Ingelheim about 8 months ago, and they introduced us to a CDMO that we now work with routinely. So it's really a very cool, kind of loop that we've had from that. And again, it that space has allowed us to hire a team that's really allowed us to fill in the mechanism of action for TGM10 and start work on these other, 80 antibodies.
That's great. Really, that's really capital efficient, as they say in our industry. Uh, are there other, now you've been through, and I asked this question really from both the spirit of, you leading the helm at GenrAb as well as your former expertise. And so for those listening today, what strategic advice do you have for early stage biotech companies that are raising capital in today's environment?
Yeah, I think now more than ever. Again, I've been doing this so long that I remember doing some fundraisers way back in the genealogic days where you could almost put a couple of PowerPoint slides together, and if the concept was good enough, you could go out and find money without much data. I now think you have to identify and articulate a plan for achieving the vision of your company. So when we say at GenrAb, we want to be a platform company, bring first-in-class new drugs to patients with neurodegeneration. So how do you do that? Well, you do that by showing that you can do it once and showing you can do it really well. And then you have the breadcrumb trail behind it of other opportunities that you can partner or maybe subsequently finance. I also think you've got to start, you said it, small and focused and hit milestones. Probably the most useful skill set you can have in raising money and building these companies is the credibility you generate yourself. I used to have a chairman of the board of a company that used to say, the only thing proprietary, Larry, is your ability to execute. And so if you can do it, you build a track record where when you come back to somebody and say, hey, remember the last time I was here, we said we were going to do these things. Now I'm here to show you the data. You, after a couple of cycles, that becomes a really valuable commodity that you can actually do what you say you're going to do, and that your programs you can navigate forward because it doesn't always work out. And I think that credibility allows you to expand the ability to engage against that vision. And so always keep the big dream in mind, but it is that plan that gets you there. And then the last thing I'd say is, and this is a broken record, but because I'm sure many of the others who come on this podcast say the same thing. You better have a plan B and a plan C and a plan D, because usually plan A doesn't quite work right. Plan B has some parts of it that work, but it's really kind of you coalesce a little bit of that into what becomes plan C and plan D, which eventually become your plan A. So I you have to think multiple steps down the road, and you have to prepare for failure and success.
Three-dimensional chess for sure. No, that's great. Let's talk a little bit about future plans then. Maybe if you could elaborate a bit more on the pipeline, the company's pipeline at GenRAB, key milestones, and the disease areas that might be next on the docket beyond even the lead candidate areas you're interested in exploring.
Yeah, well, no secret that the ability to achieve milestones, at least in our business, is directly related to access to capital. So we talked about the capital we have and what we're going to be able to do with it, but we're raising about a $60 million Series A financing. We've already got some really great traction and interest even in this marketplace in the story. We know there's a lot of work to get from here to a closing. But what's really important for us is to raise enough money to not only support the all of the preclinical work and the CMC work to support an IND submission, but to also take TGM10 through a phase one, proof of concept trial, where because it's a fully human antibody, and because it was derived from a patient with active neurological disease, we feel very good about the safety profile of the product, but we're looking at ways that even in phase one we can identify and show some early efficacy in that as well.
That's great. And when do you anticipate the IND, did you say might be filed by?
Yeah, we're hoping to get the again based on access to capital. We'd like to file the IND next year in 26, and then jump right into clinical trials right after that.
Super. Thank you for that. So are there, as we wrap up here today, I really appreciate you sharing both your background and the story of GenRab. Are there final thoughts that you'd like to leave with the audience about, GenRab, and how the company's transforming neurological care or elsewise?
Yeah, look, in some respects, we're doing something very few people have done, and many have tried. The holy grail in neurology, in general, neurological diseases are treated in two ways. Either you're trying to treat the insult, the source of the stress, the source of the injury, or you're trying to treat the symptoms. And both of them have their very legitimate, reasonable strategies. They don't, but they where they coalesce is around the health of those brain cells. And so, as we are trying to do something that, again, no one ever really has done, we're trying to preserve probably the most precious commodity either you or I have, which is those really important brain cells. Look, and I'm sure we'll not be alone, but using what we think is the greatest antibody generation platform ever created, the human body, we think we have a leg up on competition, and we think that we should have not just one interesting asset, but a series of interesting assets that comes out of this. So we're really bullish on neurology for all the reasons we've discussed today. And if the early results are predictive, we've got a really incredible opportunity in TGM10.
That's great, Larry. Final thought, how can listeners connect with you or follow GenRab's progress?
Yeah, look, we can't be more than thrilled with our progress to date, but we're in the early stages of a journey. So look forward to sharing our success and our learnings with others. Probably the best way is to www.genrab.com. Is pretty easy. Although we do and will continue to, we'll be attending many of the larger neurology-based and life science investor-based conferences like JPM over the next couple of years. And so if anyone in your audience is going to be there, please reach out. We'd love to share our story, share our success, and share where we've learned some things.
That's great. Thank you so much for that. Well, that wraps up this episode of Executive Insights for Life Sciences Innovators. I appreciate you tuning in and hope you found today's conversation valuable. If you enjoyed the discussion, please be sure to leave a review and share it with your network. We'll be taking a brief summer break and look forward to reconvening in the fall. Thanks.